Okay, Rabotai, we're continuing learning the Chatzar Yosef. We are in chapter 11, section 3. We're talking about the third person that Onkelos has called upon. Let's quickly just recap again, as we usually do at the beginning of these lectures. We're learning a story, Masechet Gittin, that talks about Onkelos, who was a convert to Judaism. He converted, but before he converted, he did some witchcraft. He did something called Ov, a method called Ov, by which either the witch or the person himself, if he knows how to do it, it's not clear which one Onkelos did, but he called upon 3 dead spirits to ask them the question of whether or not he should convert, whether or not he should become a Jew. First one he called was his uncle Titus, who destroyed the second temple. Second one he called was Bil'am, the biggest prophet of the Goyim. Now the third one that he called, that we're learning about now, is JC, of course, the central figure of the Christian religion, and he was of course a Jew. So let's just read that part of the Gemara, and we'll go straight into the analysis that we left off from last week. Of course, the first 2 people that he called told them not to join. Told them negative answers about the Jewish people. But this third person, JC, as we're about to see, he took a turn for a different turn. He actually said some positive things about the Jewish people. So this is over here. Onkelos then went and raised the Yeshu through necromancy. It's a form of witchcraft. Onkelos said to him, "What is important in that world?" Yeshu answered him, "Yisrael." Onkelos asked him, "What if I attach myself to them? In other words, what if I become Jewish?" Yeshu said to him, "Seek their welfare, do not seek their misfortune." That was his answer. Anyone who touches them is as if he were touching bebabat aino, the pupil of his eye. Whose eye? We had different interpretations. We said last week it's talking about the pupil of the person's own eye. The oppressor of the Jews, he's hurting his own eyesight. Because the Jews are the light of the world. That was the Maharsha's answer, I believe. The Jews are the light of the world. And therefore, if you oppress them, you are blocking the light from entering your own eyes and damaging your own sight. That was, I believe, yes, the Maharsha's answer. But we'll see other answers as well to explanation of that piece. The Gemara says further, Onkelos asked him, what is the punishment of that man in that world? Meaning he's talking about him, Yeshu, how are you suffering in Gehinnom? And Yeshu answered him, in boiling hot excrement. Every day he's dipped in a nice, soothing bath of boiling hot excrement. That is what the Gemara says, of course with my little flare over there. As the master said, the Gemara makes a comment that says, anyone who mocks the words of the sages will be judged in boiling hot excrement. Gemara comment, and of course, as we know, we spoke about last week the origin story of Yeshu in the Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin, how he disrespected his rabbi, because there was some miscommunication there, of course, and the Gemara there actually does reprimand and rebuke a little bit to Rabbi Yeshua ben Parachia, who was his rabbi, who treated him so harshly. It does say that he was a little too harsh, but then it led to all of this, this religion forming, and then the persecution of the Jews for so many years. It's interesting to think. Throughout history, which branch of non-Jews caused more damage to the Jewish people? Was it Isaac and by extension Christianity, or Ishmael? Modern day, we might think Ishmael from all the Arab terrorist activities. But in truth, if you take all of history, the pogroms, World War II, Inquisitions, expulsions, and etc., the Christians have the Arabs beat by a long shot of all the persecution. Anyway, let's go further over here. The Gemara makes a final comment. Come and see the difference between the sinners of Israel, which is Yeshu, he was a Jew, but he was a sinner, and versus the prophets of the nations, which is Bil'am of the world, who worship idolatry. So Bil'am, meaning the Gemara says, look at this difference. Bil'am, he was a prophet, but nevertheless, he gave a negative answer to Onkelos not to join the Jewish people. Yeshu was a Jew, a sinner, but he gave a positive answer, as we saw. Good. Now we're jumping over, right? So I was just saying the origin story. It's very important to see the first lecture in this series, where we spoke about the origin story of how Yeshu disrespected his rabbi. Basically, there was some miscommunication, and Yeshu just decided to go off the derech at that moment, and he bowed down to a brick as a form of idol worship, not because he believed the brick was God, but simply as a way to stick it to his rabbi's face. And that's called mocking the rabbis. And for that sin, and along with everything that he did after that, which is lead the Jews astray, he made his own following that was one of the reformed, early reform Jewish movements, you could say, that led to all this havoc. And for that he was punished in boiling hot excrement. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהכל נהיה בדברו. We're learning the Maharal now. Says the Maharal, page 166, you see?
Yes.
On top. Regarding Yeshu's punishment in boiling excrement, there is a conceptual distinction between impurity and repugnance. What's another word for repugnance? A simpler word. Disgusting. Right, so now, a lot of times we say the word impure, tameh, we think, oh, it's disgusting. Not necessarily. The word tameh actually has a lot of different usages in Torah. The most common is impure, but it can also mean defiled. If a woman had a relationship with somebody she's not allowed to have a relationship with, the Torah calls her tameh, nitme'ah. And also non-kosher animals are called tameh. You know?
Not fit for use.
Not fit for use. I like that. Okay. So nevertheless, the Maharal says there's a difference between impurity and repugnance, disgustingness. Impurity is defined as distance from reality. It's a deep explanation. As such, a person who contracts impurity, a person who becomes tameh, ritual impurity as we talk about in Torah, he may not enter into a holy place, into a holy locale. Right? There's a isur in the Torah. If somebody's tameh, if he contracted tum'ah from some source of tum'ah, whether it be a dead body, a nidah, whatever, so many different possibilities, he's not allowed to go inside the Beit HaMikdash, into a holy place. On the other hand, something repugnant, disgusting, such as excrement, right? We know what excrement is, number 2, is merely considered lowly and demeaning to the extent that it must separate from the body via excretion. The punishment incurred in Gehinnom is, of course, not a physical excrement, right? The Maharal is always underlining there's no such thing as physical things over there. So when the Gemara tells us that the JC is suffering and boiling hot excrement, what does it mean? He says, metaphorically, rather he says that it's the spiritual equivalent of something lowly and demeaning. Just like in this world we view excrement as ill, disgusting. Same thing in the spiritual realm, there's something like that, which we can't really put our finger on because it's a different world, but we can sort of compare. And that's what he is dipped in, so to speak, every day, wherever that is. This type of punishment is perfect for anyone who mocks the sages. Why? Because everything the sages say defines wisdom. The Chachamim, the true Chachamim, when they speak emet, they speak wisdom. Wisdom stems from intellect, which is something separate from the physical body. Look how the Maharal is explaining it. Your wisdom, can you put it in a box, in a physical, tangible container? You can't. It's something beyond. And yet, as a Chacham, you always have access to it, to enter into it and pull out whatever you need to pull out and express it. Right? So wisdom is something above the physical. Anyone who mocks the Chachamim, therefore, the sages, is mocking their wisdom, because that's what makes them special. And by virtue of him mocking them, it follows that he is the opposite of them. You're not wise if you're mocking the Chachamim. Therefore, the mocker of the Chachamim is sentenced to be punished with the opposite of what he is mocking, which is wisdom. The opposite of wisdom. What's the opposite of wisdom? Excrement. Why? Since it is also something removed from the body, just in a lowly demeaning on the other end. On the other end of the body. It's the opposite of wisdom in that sense. Wisdom is beyond you, excrement is beyond you. You mock this, you get judged with that. A stretch? You gotta really meditate on this to let it simmer, you know? It's simmering. Wisdom is something removed from the body in a glorious way, right? It's a good thing. We want to have that. We want to work on that. And since a person mocks it, if he's mocking it, he deserves to be punished with something that is removed from the body also, but in an inglorious way, such as excrement. Is that a little better now?
It's much better.
That was a hard. It was difficult for me to find the words to compile that, to make it all tied in exactly. Okay. Says the Maharal further. The sages hint at this important concept in the Masechet Sukkah 42b. What does it say over there? It says the following. A child is considered to be lacking da'at. What's da'at? This is a deep word. You could talk hours about this word, but da'at means knowledge, wisdom, understanding, a certain maturity. Okay, children don't have that. We understand that, and that leads to a lot of halachic outcomes. So you're reading ahead over there. What's one of those halachic outcomes? Meaning a child doesn't have proper knowledge to make legally binding decisions. Right? A child cannot buy something from you. A child can sell you his land. Things like that. As such, one does not have to distance himself from the child's excrement when doing holy activities such as praying or learning Torah. What, it's not recording? No, okay. You scared me for a second. I did a half a lecture. Okay.
It's fixing it.
Thank you. So, what are we saying over here? We're saying, we're doing some halakha over here. Important halakha. If you have young children in the house, it applies. Or if you're a grandfather, it applies. You're not allowed to do holy activities such as say Kriyat Shema, say a bracha, learn Torah, in the vicinity of something disgusting or impure, such as excrement, okay? Or if somebody's body is exposed in a certain way, also not allowed. Right? The Gemara, the halachot, the Shulchan Aruch goes to all the examples of a woman who's exposed. Let's say her hair, also same thing. Hair is considered erva. Other things, things that are usually covered. If they're exposed, let's say it's your wife, she's changing, and you're allowed to say berachot, staring at her. No, halakha is no.
Can you turn around?
According to the Ashkenazi approach, halakha, you have to completely turn your body around from wherever that is, and then you can say bracha. If it's like an undressed person. According to Sephardi approach, you can close your eyes and say the bracha.
When you say exposed,
Ashkenazim are more stringent because they don't trust you to close your eyes. You got to move your body away.
The problem with closing your eyes.
Yes.
If let's say you look at me right now, you close your eyes, you're still seeing me.
No.
Close your eyes.
What are you talking about?
No.
You can imagine anything, anywhere, wherever you are.
Not imagine. Look at the light and see what you see when you close.
Lights are different. Lights are different. They leave a color that's different.
Absolutely. When I look at you and I close my eyes, I still see you for a little.
Are you trying to say I'm emitting light?
Exactly. Any human being I see,
Beseder. So you take you guys coming too late, man. It's such a great lecture. You're coming too late.
But at least they came.
Okay. Beseder. So I can't go back now. We're recording, and I have to. Okay.
What's exposed? Definition of exposed?
Anything that's usually covered by a woman. Okay, so even by a man, if he's exposed, if he has no pants on, you're not allowed to look at him and say bracha or learn Torah or anything like that. So by women, it's usually anything above the elbows, above the knees. Hair. She's married, exactly. Collarbone. The regular laws of tzniut, laws of covering. Yeah.
About a pool.
If you're in a pool.
All men's pool. Can I say shot?
All men's pool, will they have pants on? It's no problem.
No.
The shirts are off? That's no problem. A man's shirt, no problem.
Why? It's usually covered.
We're talking about the erva. We're talking about downstairs. That's the problem. Yeah. If everyone has swimming trunks on, enjoy your margarita. Say shakol. Okay, that's one. Another thing you're not allowed to say barachot around is what?
I said this in front of a certain sect of Jews. He was very against it. He's like, oh, you can't make a bracha if you're not dressed. He's like, you can't make a bracha. He's very against
the bare minimum halakha is that you have to have underwear on and a kippah. If you have one of our underwears that have a tight waistband and a kippah, technically you can say Kriyat Shema, you could say any bracha. Can you pray tefillah? No. You can't say Amidah like that because you have to be dressed like in front of a king. That's different. That's higher level. But Kriyat Shema from the letter of the law, you could say. Is it recommended? No, you should. Kriyat Shema is the mitzvah d'oraita. You should try to dress a little bit more. Put a robe on or something at least.
What about after going to the restroom? Can you lie down and put covers on yourself and say the bracha?
After going to the restroom, you want to say Asher Chatzar?
Yeah.
Are you dressed?
Obviously.
What are you wearing? Is it nothing?
Just the trunks.
Trunks? And you have a kippah on? Technically, you can say it. Yeah.
Can you do it lying down, covered up?
Lying down, that particular bracha, any bracha you shouldn't say lying down on your back. The Shulchan Aruch allows you to say Kriyat Shema and Barachot lying on your left side. Not on your back. On your back, it's an issue. It's a disrespect. The Erba is facing up. On your left side.
If you're under your blanket.
It's still not recommended. It's not good. On the back, it's not good.
If you don't have underwear, we have a towel. It's covered. It's covered.
If you don't have underwear, but you have a towel, I don't think so, because it needs to be something tight that won't open. If you really made it tight, it's gonna open. If it's like loosely will open, it's a problem. It's a problem. Not allowed. You have to have a separation between erba and your heart. Yes, that's why the waistband, a belt-like structure. Yes, is what you need to separate from the erba and the heart. Again, we're digressing into these halachot, but the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there's a halacha. Same halacha applies to excrement. If somebody took excreted in your vicinity, you're not allowed. If it's anywhere in your eyesight, even beyond 4 amot, it's a mile away, but you can see it, and it's human number 2, you're not allowed to say a bracha looking that way.
Your nose range.
Not allowed. That's number 1. Number 2, what if you can't see it, but you can smell it? Not allowed. You have to go 4 amot away from where it stops smelling. That's the halacha.
What if I heard him?
If you heard him what?
Excrete.
Do you hear it or smell it? I'm sorry. Do you smell it or see it?
No.
There's a wall between you and him.
No.
So how did you hear it?
So have you been ever out in the open with their kids and stuff like that? You know, people do this.
No, hearing is not a problem. If you hear someone pass gas, it's not an issue. But if you smell it, it's a problem. You're not allowed. Or if you, again, with number 2 comes down to seeing it or smelling it. That is asur. So now the question is, what about a child? What about a baby? All she's drinking all day is breast milk, a fainting. It smells sweet. It smells sweet.
You know that it doesn't.
It has a sweeter smell.
It does.
It does. It's different than yours. Okay, it's very different.
I thought it was
Of course, you do chocolate over there.
Until the baby starts eating solid food, it does not smell.
That's right. Until he starts eating people food, it doesn't. It smells like yogurt. You're right. Take a. You won't know the difference. Take a 1 month old baby's number 2. Blindfold yourself and open a yogurt. They smell almost exactly the same. Mamash. I'm telling you.
I'm glad we got a same.
I'm not saying that. Chachamim are saying it. Why? There's halakha. The halakha says that if a child hasn't started eating people food yet, now what's the measurement? There's actually a measurement over here that the Chachamim give. They're bringing it down over here. Yes, look at note number 3. Gemara there says Masechet Sukkah 42b. Explains that once the child begins to eat a kazayit size of grain,
that's right.
Okay, about 27 grams, 1 fluid ounce, right? In that time, it eats it in the time it takes to, it's called kedei achilat pras. That's a time halachic measurement. Right. It's about 4 to 7 minutes. The more normal amount of time it takes to eat that a pras, which is a certain amount of bread. Then his excrement is considered something that must be distanced from when doing holy activities. Only at that point. So if you have a newborn baby drinking, it's not yet. Not there. This doesn't apply. You're allowed. From a practical standpoint, this is because eating normal foods causes the excrement to become especially repulsive. It's the solid food. While a baby's diet is exclusively breast milk, the child's excrement actually has a sweet aroma and is not offensive, which is not the case once it starts consuming solid foods, as we said.
That's what they say. What does that have to do with reality?
What do you mean?
I'm in reality. I deal with it right now.
It's true. When you have a child, you can do the experiment.
Okay. Were they eating solid foods?
No.
So look forward over here. How do you apply that now in a philosophical realm? The Maharal takes this. It says the following: a child is considered to be lacking da'at, lacking proper knowledge, to make these legally binding decisions. As such, one does not have to distance himself from the minor's excrement when doing holy activities, like we just said. But when it comes to an adult who is considered to have da'at, once they're over 13, you have something called da'at halachically. We consider you can make financial transactions. You're independent. You're mentally mature. One absolutely must distance himself from an adult's excrement when doing holy activities. As it says, it's learned out from the pasuk in the Torah. This is a different pasuk actually. This is a pasuk in Kohelet. It says, "V'yosif da'at, yosif mach'ov." When you increase da'at, you increase pain. That's a deep statement.
The
more you know, the more vulnerable you become to pain. The less innocent you become, the more things can hurt you.
So they say ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, basically, right? Of course. But we're applying it to this case. In this case, there's a halachic a hint here that once a person is mature, he has da'at, the more he knows, the more offensive his excrement becomes, and therefore you're not allowed to do holy activities around that excrement.
That doesn't make sense.
Why doesn't it make sense? It makes perfect sense.
Why would his excrement become more
offensive?
It's offensive to other people.
Because he knows more?
It comes with, you have to pay attention to the wording.
It basically means as the person grows up,
yeah.
I understand.
Develops.
I understand that. The more you know, like...
This correlation, he's just pointing out correlations. I'm telling you, he's pointing out correlations. Age increases, da'at increases.
You get smarter with age.
The more disgusting the excrement becomes. Yeah. He's pointing out that correlation. You follow? That's all.
People's excrement stinks.
Why do you look so confused?
You'll get it. When you get there, you'll get it.
He's just pointing out the correlation. As a person gets older and matures, he acquires da'at. At the same time,
he acquires the smell.
His excrement becomes more offensive. We just said this halakha. A child is fine.
I haven't paid attention, but I don't know if it's progressively gotten worse.
The main difference is between a child and an adult. Okay, so look at this. This is due to the basic concept that opposites are always found together. When something comes into existence, its opposite must come along with it.
Yin and yang.
Thus, when the child's da'at comes into existence upon its maturation, the offensiveness of its excrement becomes actualized as well. They go together. These are the very deep matters, he says, the fundamentals of wisdom. That's what the Maharal says.
It makes sense. The more knowledge you have, the more painful it is. The more it's like painful in terms of uncomfortable. It's like I know that I have to do this halacha now. It's like I have to go out of my way to now pray in a minyan, or it's like I now have to do X, Y, and Z.
I disagree with that because you're characterizing service of God as pain right now, 100%, painful. 100%. So I completely disagree with you on that.
100%.
It's because you're trying to save the soul.
100%.
You're taking a different interpretation of the verse. The verse is saying the way the Maharal is presenting it is very simple. He's saying pain here means what? Pain here means the pain you cause other people.
So I'm saying knowing that I need to do as I get older, there's certain things I need to do. It's not forget service of God. There's certain things that now are required of me because now I'm older. It's not.
But that's not how he's explaining. The verse is like this: Yosef dad, Yosef machov. Simple words. Increasing knowledge increases pain.
When do you increase?
The more you know, the more you can inflict pain. That's what it's saying.
In many more ways than just that.
Yes.
Many more ways than just the excrement. When you become experienced, you know how to hurt other people by saying certain things, by acting a certain way. All those things are multiplied.
That's what we're talking about.
I don't know the correlation between excrement.
Because you came in the middle, that's why.
You're not paying attention.
We started talking about excrement because the JC's punishment is boiling hot excrement. Why? Because he mocked the chachamim.
Yeah.
Right. So then the Maharal is making this point that he's making this observation that that excrement becomes offensive the more mature a person gets. Because
don't take excrement literally. Excrement could be words that come out of somebody's mouth as good as excrement, you know what I mean? And they could be very painful to other people.
Okay, good.
There are many ways you can correlate this.
Next one, Ben Yehoyada. Last commentary here. The Ben Yehoyada says the following. The expression that JC used in the Gemara where he says anyone who touches them is as if he were touching the pupil of his eye, referring to the Jewish people.
I say it's eye of Hashem.
It means as follows. Edom, which is Esav, is the klipa of the pig. This is the Kabbalistic concept that Esav is, his animal that represents him is the pig. And the Megillah Amukot, that's a very deep sefer, which we quoted a few times in this book. It literally means the revealer of secrets. He wrote that if one wishes to kill a pig, he should blind its eye.
Who is he?
Megillah Amukot is a book, sefer, Rabbi Natan Spira, in the 1600s. Very deep book. It's hard to find. Thus, the lifeline of Edom is in his eyes. Look at note number 5. In other words, Edom is the ancestor of Rome, as we said. Rome came out of Esav and Edom. and Onkelos was Roman. So Yeshu was warning Onkelos that anyone who touches Israel is as if he were blinding his own eye, which for the Romans means killing himself, because the lifeline of Edom is in his eyes, according to the Megillah Makot. Regarding Yeshu's punishment now, says the Ben Yehuda, since he mocked the teachings of the sages in such a way that made them repulsive in the eyes of the public, he too was punished in something repulsive in the form of boiling excrement. This can happen in two ways. The first way is that the person's soul reincarnates in feces in this world. That's one way to be to actualize this, what this actually means, says the Ben Yehuda. The second way that this happens is that the person's soul is placed in Gehenna, and the fire of Gehenna manifests for him as boiling hot excrement. Again, it's spiritual concepts, but we get the idea. This second way involves more suffering because neighboring dwellers of Gehenna suffer from the repulsiveness of the excrement as well, and they curse him as a result. There is this concept that you're going to have neighbors wherever you go. Where a person goes to Olam Haba or Gehenna, there's neighbors, and those neighbors can either curse you or bless you as well, depending on what your punishment is.
Well, if they're next to him and they're uncomfortable,
they're getting the splatter, the splash black.
They're getting their own punishment, and for a reason, I guess.
Yeah. Beseder. Okay, so that is the Amudei Chatzar section. Now I want to jump into the Chatzar Yosef just for a little bit, guys, if you guys will humor me, I'm sorry.
We'll humble you.
Humor me is what I meant to say. Says the Chatzar Yosef, anyone who mocks the words of the sages will be judged in boiling hot excrement. That's what we were trying to analyze. Maharsha duly notes that the verse Kohelet 12:12. So there was a verse. This from last week was a little bit difficult to explain. There's a pasuk in Kohelet 12:12 that Rashi brings down on the Gemara. Let's see what he says over there quickly. The verse says like this. The king. It's on note 4 on page 165. Kohelet, which is the name of King Shlomo, who's the author of the book Kohelet. He calls himself Kohelet. Kohelet sought to find words of delight and words of truth recorded properly. This is the end of the book of Kohelet, by the way. He signs off with these few verses. With these verses. So he says, Kohelet sought to find words of delight and words of truth recorded properly. That was his goal. He was trying to bring you deep concepts and truth, which the whole book of Kohelet is filled with. It's an amazing book. You should look into it, commentaries, anything. Anyway, the words of the wise are given from one shepherd. That was referring to Moshe Rabbeinu. The words of the wise is the Torah. The shepherd is Moshe. Beyond these, that's referring to the oral Torah. Beyond the words of the wise, which was brought down by Moshe, the physical Torah, the written Torah, beyond that is the oral Torah. So beyond these, says Kohelet, my son, be cautious, be careful when you're dealing with the oral Torah, with the Chachamim. That's what Chachamim are all about, the oral Torah. Be careful. Why? The making of many books has no limit, and much lahag, which means study, leads to weariness of flesh. Rashi takes the word lahag and he interprets it as la'ag with the ayin, which means mock. So much mockery leads to weariness of flesh. Weariness of flesh is like the byproduct of flesh, which is excrement. So that's where Rashi connected it to JC.
Let's say we don't use Rashi. How do you understand that verse? Much study. Did anyone look into that?
Yeah, I mean the simple meaning seems to be that studying a lot will tire you out, make you tired.
Tire you out, yeah. And also you leave the present realm, you go into spiritual realm. You have no use for other people next to you. You're on a different level. They're on a different level. You can't understand each other anymore. Yeah. You understand? So you stay away from flesh. Normal human beings.
So now regarding this verse, back in the Chatzar Yosef, page 167, Maharsha noted that when the pasuk says much mockery, it hints at what the mockers are mocking. That there is too much that the sages enacted as fences, making Torah observance tedious. That's what they're mocking. That's what people like to mock a lot when it comes to the oral Torah, where they mock. Too many fences, too many rules. The rabbis keep adding rules. Right? That's what the word much means. It's too much. This is definitely one of the types of mockeries that deserves punishment. But it seems there's an even more severe type of mockery that could occur that our Gemara may be addressing. We are referring to something prevalent in our days. So I go on a little bit of a, call it a rant here, a little bit of a very much needed discussion about the journey that a lot of Baalei Teshuvah, people who are trying to become more religious, they come across this challenge at one point or another. That's what I'm going to address here. I think we'll end it with that at the end of this paragraph. So we're referring to something prevalent in our days when people mock the sages because they hear of a certain law or custom that they instituted, which they claim makes no logical sense, right? I'm sure you guys have heard this many times. Okay. They call it something far-fetched and fairy tale-like. You made it up. Therefore, besides the fact that they do not follow it themselves, they make fun of those who do, claiming that they have been brainwashed and are blind puppets whose strings the rabbis pull at their bidding. The rabbi got you on the string, huh? The rabbi, you do anything the rabbi says. For this to come from a secular individual, like those so pervasively present in our days, is unfortunate, yet understandable. They don't know anything, they don't know any better. Okay, fine, a secular person doesn't know anything about Torah, mitzvot. Okay, what else do you expect them to say? It goes without saying that such people are far off base and should first enter the room of a religious lifestyle before they may comment on the decor inside it. You like that imagery right there? That was for you. The real heartbreakers, however, are those self-proclaimed religious individuals, or those that call themselves observant on some level, who mock certain laws or concepts or practices that they may not have heard of before or don't know enough about. Mocking something that one does not understand comes from a very weak mental place. The reason such people come to this conclusion is due to one of two possible thought processes. Why do you make fun of something you don't understand? Two possibilities. The first one is as follows. The new information presented to them seems to be based on solid ground, but accepting this new information as true and factual would mean that they would have to adjust their own behavior accordingly, which the Yetzer Hara is designed to resist greatly. It is much more convenient to simply mock and deny it, making it seem like the information in question is the flawed part of the equation, which allows them to remain complacent in their current inappropriate behavior. Simply put, people don't want to change. If they admit that what you're saying is true, now they have to recalculate their own lives. Well, maybe I should be doing that. No, but it's too hard. It's inconvenient. I don't wanna. So I'll just make fun of it. Now what are you talking about? It's a joke. What are you saying?
Knowledge leads to pain, I guess.
Why do you keep looking at it that way, man?
No, but
he just correlated with what he said before.
No, but he's saying it's Avodat Hashem, so it's the wrong way of looking at it.
Of course, it's not painful.
It can't be painful if it's Avodat Hashem.
But we are human.
It's curing on the contrary, it's curing.
You gotta go inside the room before you comment
on the decor. Thank you.
You understand the room you have to be in with all of the
I'm in the room. Look at the decor.
So now look. That was possibility number one. Why a person mocks something it doesn't understand. The second possibility is that since this new information does not make sense to this person, then it must be false. Plain and simple. What does that mean? This thought process is a grave misstep and a complete antithesis of fundamental Torah attitude. The implication of this approach is the following. If a person makes fun of something that he doesn't understand, this is what he's thinking. My wisdom and knowledge, he might not say it, but he's thinking this. My wisdom and knowledge are incredibly superior, encompassing all attainable knowledge in the world, and since I cannot comprehend or understand this premise or dynamics of this new information that someone's telling me, it follows that it must be false.
Makes sense.
Do you see how egotistical that is? They are so quick to blame something exterior to them before they blame themselves, where the true blame belongs. There is no greater demonstration of egoism than this. Okay? The correct approach is as follows. Granted, I may not fully understand this new information, but since this information is sourced amongst the Chachamim, it's in the Torah, right? There's a whole note, which maybe we'll get to later. Since this information is sourced from amongst the Chachamim of the Torah, whose understanding is much deeper than I can even attempt to comprehend, therefore it must be sourced in truth. The ideal approach is to make necessary adjustments in one's behavior to comply with the new information, if it applies. Eventually, through spiritual and intellectual development, through dedicated Torah study, one learns more about that topic and eventually reaches an understanding as to the why and the how, of the information that was once new. This is the secret of when it says, all that Hashem speaks, na'aseh v'nishma, we shall do and we shall listen. That's what Am Yisrael said when they received the Torah. They said, we shall do and we shall listen. Right? Implying that we'll do the Torah first, and then we don't understand it, and eventually we'll listen, we'll learn about it, and then we'll understand it. Right? This is one of the main reasons that Hashem decided to give the Torah to the Jewish people in the first place. The Torah comes from the infinite one above all, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whose wisdom is beyond bounds and is not adequately describable in human terms. You agree with me on that? Thus, for someone to think that he can understand absolutely all there is to know in Torah is unrealistic. It's impossible. However, whoever says, I will not perform any mitzvah until I understand it fully, he's just a sinner with excuses. Who are you to understand God's wisdom fully? Nowhere in the Torah does it say that one is only obligated to keep a mitzvah when only after he fully understands all of its nuances. That's not what the deal was. That's not what the covenant was. It's not the contract is. The obligation is to keep the Torah, to keep it is instant and eternal once we accepted it. While intellectual development is gradual and slow. It takes time to learn new things, right? Something has to give. Even if one cannot bring himself to keep a certain mitzvah or an enactment right now, one should at least avoid mocking the sages. If you can't see yourself doing it right now, don't make fun of it. It just makes you look that much worse. At the very least, one should say, even though I don't understand it yet and it is difficult for me to practice accordingly now, I do not deny its truth and validity. Hopefully with self-refinement and hard work, I will soon reach the level to practice and understand it. That is the bare minimum approach we should have. I just want to read note number 1 and then I'm going to call it a day. So when I say that the Chachamim are smart, they're wise, they know what they're talking about, we have to follow them, who exactly am I talking about? Because we live in a generation where people, when you say rabbis or Chachamim, they think, oh, the rabbi down the street in that shul, he's a, what do they say in Russian? Mashenik. How do I translate that in Russian? How do I translate it in English? Con man? Con artist. He's a con artist, right? Unfortunately, people have these experiences and it's negative experiences. They think, oh, he's making rules, why should I follow him? He's not that much smarter than me, right? So I'll have to just address that point very quickly. Note number 1. We must make a critical distinction when we say Chachamim or sages throughout this book and throughout all the sources, we're referring to the rabbis of old, from the times of the Mishnah and Gemara, the Tanaim and Amoraim, that was their titles, who lived about 1500 years ago and beyond. Only they had the power to enact decrees and fences that obliged all subsequent generations. Whenever you say something is derabanan, asur derabanan, it's forbidden from the rabbis, rabbinically, we're talking about those rabbis. Okay? 1500 years ago or more. This is not true of the contemporary rabbis of our generation. They are not the ones who enact these decrees and rabbinic laws that we speak of. This is a common question among beginners in Torah, as we said. After witnessing or experiencing the unfortunate phenomenon of modern day corruption, they question why we should follow the enactments of certain corrupt leaders. Pirates have long beards and funny hats too. You get it?
I got it.
If anybody listens to Rabbi Mizrahi, he has a long running joke. He says, what does he say? He says, it's free to grow a beard or something like that. And the hats, he calls them sombreros. They have sombreros in Mexico too. That's what he says all the time. Sombreros. You get the point. Just because you look like a rabbi doesn't mean you're 100% that this person is legit. Thus, it must be understood that the rabbinic laws we refer to are not set up by modern day rabbis, but rather the sages of the Talmud, the Gemara, who were immense spiritual personalities and reservoirs of wisdom, able to achieve feats like resurrection of the dead. That's what the Gemara talks about. Due to the rule of thumb that each passing generation is less powerful in spiritual wisdom, their levels are incomprehensible to most of us. Every generation that passes, the spiritual level goes down a little bit. So imagine 50 generations before what they were compared to us. They set up fences and protections under the guise of rabbinic enactments to protect Jews from the grave offense of transgressing prohibitions from the Torah itself. There is much to be said on this topic, but here is not the place, even though we've already said much about it. Let us pose a couple of comparisons, to demonstrate the important role of rabbinic laws. Here's number one. Something extremely valuable, okay, such as a large precious diamond or gem, is not left under lackluster security. Instead, multiple safes, locks, codes, and guards are put in place to keep it safe. The Torah is even more precious than the most precious gem. So you got to protect it. You don't want to transgress it. That's what it means. It's Sud Rabbanan. Secondly, when waiting to cross a busy street with heavy vehicles zooming past, 16-wheelers, going at 80 miles an hour, and you're waiting for your turn to pass, it's not wise to stand right at the edge of the curb, right? Right there, a millimeter away from these trucks. Instead, one takes several steps backward, creating a safe cushion of space, a safe zone. The repercussions of crossing the Torah can be even more dire than being hit by the heaviest 18-wheeler. So therefore, a safe zone is necessary. So we spoke a lot about a few different topics today. I think it was very productive. So B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to finish off this thing on JC and the excrement next week. Don't miss it, because we're gonna say something very nice about tying it all together. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen ve'amen.